This is the Jerry Doyle Show.
We asked for $700 billion to purchase troubled assets from financial institutions. At the time, we believed that would be the most effective means of getting credit flowing again. During the 2 weeks that Congress considered the legislation, market conditions worsened considerably.
A former Treasury Secretary, as we affectionately call him here on the program, Shifty Paulson, crooked enough to sleep in a trombone, in my opinion. We have the ability to look back a year ago and take a look at what was being said, what was being done with regard to this financial crisis that we're seeing domestically and internationally. And I can only imagine how crazy it was on the inside of the White House, and I always love the opportunity to talk with people who were on the inside who could give us a little insight into just what kind of a financial fire drill was taking place, information flying around, decisions being made, and how we ended up where we are today. Matt Latimer joining us on the show to talk about his book, Speechless, Tales of a White House Survivor. He was appointed special assistant to the president for speechwriting in March of 2007. Mr. Latimer, welcome to the program.
Oh, great to be here. I'm a big fan of your show.
Thank you very much. How crazy was it on the inside? I mean, because we're looking at it just going, I felt like we were the girl outside of the house in Poltergeist, just screaming, "What's happening?" It must have been just nuttier on the inside.
It really was, and Treasury Secretary Paulson was sort of running his own show, and he kept telling the president and us different things for why he needed this money right away. And then after he scared everybody to death about giving him basically $700 billion for him to do as he pleased, that he didn't do anything with it forever, and he changed his plan again at least once or twice again.
What about I've heard congressmen on the House floor talking about how there were even threats made about martial law if they didn't sign on to that TARP program right away. Is there any truth to that?
I never heard the martial law, but, you know, the scenario that they were sketching out to us, the Treasury people, was so frightening that I thought, you know, currency was going to stop being valuable anymore. It was the most terrifying scenario that the president heard, members of Congress heard, we all heard, and the only thing we could do is just trust this guy, and I talk about this in my book, to trust this guy with all of our money and basically just, you know, count on him to solve everything. And, of course, he was a person from Wall Street, and Wall Street was part of the problem to begin with.
So when he's asking for that kind of money, and President Bush, and we were playing President Bush a year ago today talking with small business owners down in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm sure, you know, people knock Bush around, and he deservedly got it in some areas, others he didn't. But, you know, they're looking like he's the guy that's sitting there looking at the spreadsheets. He's analyzing the credit default swap market. He's looking at the CDOs and the SIVs and the TARPs and the PPIPs. And President Bush is the guy that ultimately makes the decision. Right. How much of what the president comes forward and tells the American people is based upon the team that he surrounds himself with?
A lot of it. I mean, the president had a Harvard MBA and was a smart person. He wasn't dumb, and he understood a lot about the economy. But I mean, these are very we've been told by economic advisors for more than a year before this that the economy was robust and strong, and look at how great the Dow is. And Paulson himself said this is the strongest economy I've ever seen in my business lifetime, and that's what they told the president. And then all of a sudden, everything was wrong.
Well, let me ask you this. How does he get because we played audio from Paulson on Jim Lehrer in April of 2007 where he said the housing market has reached a bottom, it's contained, we have a diverse, healthy economy. Then 5 months later, he's at Georgetown University, and he says we have no interest in bailing out lenders or property speculators. Then on Bloomberg, July 11th of 2008, he said Fannie and Freddie, according to the regulators that he's talked with, are adequately capitalized. Right. How does he, the Treasury Secretary, get it so wrong?
I don't know, and I don't know how he's gotten away with it for so long, because a lot of people think he's this guy who saved everything. But, you know, I don't know. It's really a mystery, because from my own perspective as a speechwriter, he was saying all kinds of things that really didn't sort of add up and got away with it.
What, being on the inside, I mean, I've had the opportunity to go to the White House, and it's just very cool. I mean, that whole, the aura of the place is phenomenal. I mean, just being in Washington, D.C. and driving around at night, the Jefferson Memorial, the Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial, it's a fascinating place. But inside the White House, when things are not, let's say, going as fluidly as you might like that day, is it really just like a complete lunatic asylum?
Well, I was there in the last couple of years of the Bush administration. I worked for Rumsfeld before that at the Pentagon. And I sort of, Doris Kearns Goodwin had that book called Team of Rivals about the Lincoln years. I sort of saw sort of a team of buddies. And it was like a lot of nice people who wanted to help the president, but were in a lot of positions where they had thin qualifications, and that made it easier for people to just sort of, scare everybody because no one else sort of seemed to know much about what was going on.
When you look at the trust factor, I remember when I came off my TV series Babylon 5 and I was on the cover of TV Guide, and there were people that, let's say just attractive women that I couldn't have bought a drink for the week before, but now somehow I could have a harem if I wanted them, and it's like you get these false impressions of what people's intentions are. How does a president, with all of those people around him, with all of the pressures on him, and the press beating up on him for every little thing, how do you keep a team of advisors that you can trust? Aren't you constantly looking over your shoulder?
Well, that's sort of why it kind of ended up the way that it was in the Bush administration. Was he sort of was left with people that he was comfortable with and that he trusted, but a lot of those people were sort of, nice people who, as I say, weren't particularly well suited for their tasks. And meanwhile, you'd have people like Treasury Secretary Paulson, who was friends with the Chief of Staff, Josh Bolten, who came in and said things, and the president wanted to believe people were telling him the truth, but when you're surrounded with people who are just sort of yes people, it can be a problem.
And when you're crafting a speech for the president, is there a through line to what the administration is about at a certain period in time? Some of the speeches obviously have to be almost in a crisis mode, that you're dealing with that problem, that moment on that day. But do you always try and keep a through line to what the theme of the administration is?
Well, we tried to do that for a while, and it turned out we had a lot of themes. But basically, towards the end, everything was about the economy, and for the longest time, the theme about the economy was we may have a rough patch, but we're resilient and strong. And then it became, we need to make drastic efforts and give up the free market system just to keep the economy afloat. So that theme of a great bustling economy sort of went out the window. But we tried to have themes, especially like when you talk about the war and other things, but it's hard to do that when all these disasters just kept happening.
Yeah, Matt Latimer is with us. His book is Speechless, Tales of a White House Survivor, Amazon.com, all the usual suspects. We'll link to it at jerrydoyle.com. There's a president, like when they go, he almost choked to death on a pretzel, and I watch the late-night comedians just, like almost taking a certain joy in the fact that the president of the United States was going to choke to death on a pretzel, and what irony that his only supposed true friend, Barney the dog, would be by his side. And there's a certain, just nastiness that the press has about the possible death of the president.
Yes. There's a lot of that in Washington, and every Republican president I ever have heard of was always supposed to be this big dummy and this big loser in the media. And there's a lot of vicious stuff that happens to presidents. And to be fair, that happens to President Obama too, to some degree. But it's tough. And President Bush sort of kind of used to tell us, as I say this in my book, that he sort of tried to avoid reading the newspapers and following the news, and he never read the New York Times, for example. But Mrs. Bush did, and his parents did, and they didn't like it.